A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. I'm looking at a meaningless world. 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 A meaningless world engenders fear, because I think I'm in competition with God. A meaningless world engenders fear. Why? Because I think I'm in competition with God. Okay, a problem, he says, that all the separated ones make to one degree or another. That empty space that we're trying to fill, the ego wants to fill it up. He's going to explain. Let's look at it. And I'm a forgiveness teacher from the Ozarks, Miracle Willie, and we're ready for our Saturday, January the 13th of 2024's lesson. Lesson 13, A Meaningless World Engenders Fear. Thank you so much for joining me today and studying this lesson. Today's idea is really another form of the preceding one. And yesterday's lesson was, I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. And we were supposed to do that with our eyes open. I said eyes closed, I think, when I was reading it, but hopefully you caught that, because there's no way you could have done it with your eyes closed. I think I see and you're supposed to name everything you see. But today's a little different. Today's idea is really another form of the preceding one, except that it is more specific as the emotion aroused. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible, because God made everything. Nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not think you perceive something that has no meaning. On the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think you do perceive it. Recognition of meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning is to be written in the empty space that meaninglessness provides. And that word challenge is in quotes, because yes, the ego does challenge God, but God doesn't respond. God doesn't know of any challenges. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning is to be written in the empty space that meaninglessness provides. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. And on this alone is it correct, that the ego is really unreal, and that it's powerless. It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. I've noticed this so often that in my past, before I came into a clearer understanding of what Course in Miracles was teaching, I used to have a meaning for everything that I saw, because I didn't want, and he's explaining why that is. But we're learning that we can just remain with an open mind. We don't have to understand everything. We can be okay not knowing that we'll be shown everything that we need to know when we need to know it. That's that trusting God aspect that we're learning to do more and more, just to abide in that perfect peace and joy that He gives to those who trust Him. It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess, and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you who equate yourself with the ego. Illusions are safety devices to the ego. The exercises for today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times for not more than a minute or so at most each time, are to be practiced in a somewhat different way from the preceding ones. With eyes closed, repeat today's idea to yourself. A meaningless world engenders fear. Then open your eyes and look about you slowly, saying, I'm looking at a meaningless world. Repeat this statement to yourself as you look about. I'm looking at a meaningless world, and just look about you. Then close your eyes and conclude. A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. You may find it, so you'll end by saying, with your eyes closed again after about a minute or so, he says, close your eyes again and conclude by saying a meaningless world engenders fear, and then add the statement, because I think I am in competition with God. You may find it difficult to avoid resistance in one form or another to this concluding statement. Whatever form such resistance may take, remind yourself that you are really afraid of such a thought because of the vengeance of the enemy. You're not expected to believe the statement at this point and will probably dismiss it as preposterous. Note carefully, however, any signs of overt or covert fear which it may arouse. And the word covert means secret or hidden, and the word overt means full view or obvious, and they are opposite of each other. So he says whether it's an inside kind of secret hidden fear, or whether it's an outright obvious shuddering in your boots fear, just note them. This is our first attempt at stating an explicit cause and effect relationship of a kind which you are very inexperienced in recognizing. Do not dwell on the concluding statement, and try not even to think of it except during the practice period. That will suffice at present. In that concluding statement, he said, don't even he said, well, he'll explain it as we go along, but he said at this point, don't be too caught up with it. Just use it in the practice period. A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. And then just notice whatever fears come about as you practice this lesson. Okay, let's go back and look at our text reading for today. And we're in chapter 2, the separation and the atonement. And we're ready for Roman numeral 4, healing as release from fear. What holy days are going on today? What's the Korean American Day? Commemorates Korean immigrants to the U.S. on this day in 1903. Make Your Dreams Come True Day. National Peach Melba Day. And Peach Melba is a French peach dessert. It's vanilla ice cream with raspberry sauce and peaches on it. It sounds delicious. National Sticker Day. National Vision Board Day. Take a break and listen to some poetry on Poetry Break Day. That's today also. And Public Radio Broadcasting Day, Rubber Ducky Day, and Stephen Foster Memorial Day. And he was considered the father of American music. He only lived to be 38 years old, 1826 to 1864. He was the one that wrote "Oh Susanna, Oh Susanna." You remember that song? Camptown Races, My Old Kentucky Home, and many, many more. I think I read he wrote 200 songs. Many of them we've probably heard, or a lot of them. And let's look at inedible landscaping, another pomegranate. And this is a Russian, or not another, it's our first of our pomegranates out of edible landscaping. And last year I didn't read any about the pomegranates because they're actually mainly zone 7 and higher. But you know, you might want to grow them in a greenhouse. And this first one we're going to be reading about actually will do okay in zone 6 in a protected area, which, you know, on the south side of a rock structure or a building, where it gets a little protection from the cold north wind. Russian pomegranate, Salavatski. Salavatski is a hard-seeded pomegranate variety. According to Dr. Levin, the originator of the variety, the hard-seeded variety can withstand cold temperatures by a few degrees than the soft-seeded varieties. We can thank Dr. Levin for the many pomegranate varieties. Thank you, Dr. Levin. He has given us a new fruit for our area that is beautiful and easy to grow. More protection and less in the open helps especially with younger plants. Salavatski has ripened in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is zone 6, planted on the south side of a home. But it's generally considered zone 7 through 10. And of course, as you begin to grow it, it might even actually become more and more climatized to your area, and its children would be. Okay, let's see. And we're in our and what is our pomegranate? Is the Punica granatum. That's your genus and species. And for Permacultures for Beginners, in Chapter 1, we're ready for the section called Pests and Predators. The arrival of pests is inevitable to any garden, and their presence can severely damage the growth and development of flourishing plant life. In permaculture gardening, the objective is to avoid using pesticides and other artificial methods that contaminate an ecosystem, selecting instead to encourage the natural predators of those pests to control their presence. Common pests and predators include, and we'll go through these in the next few days, but tomorrow we'll read about aphids and maybe even a few others, but we'll look at all those. But that's a key point in permaculture, is to let things come into balance without affecting it artificially. Okay, let's take a look at healing as release from fear. Oh, and since it's Korean American Day, the word for peace in Korean is Pyeonghwa. 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 So, Pyeonghwa to you. Healing as release from fear. Our emphasis is now on healing. The miracle is the means, the atonement is the principle, and healing is the result. To speak of a miracle of healing is to combine two orders of reality inappropriately. Healing is not a miracle. The atonement, or the final miracle, is a remedy, and any type of healing is a result. So we want to keep, okay, so he's explaining something that he'll build on and explain as we go along, but this is a pretty important concept. To speak of a miracle of healing is to combine two orders of reality inappropriately. Healing is not a miracle. The atonement, or the final miracle, is a remedy, and any type of healing is a result. So the cause is the miracle, and the result is a healing. Any type of healing is the remedy, and any type of healing is a result. The atonement, or the final miracle, is the atonement. Okay, I see. The atonement, or the final miracle, is a remedy, and any type of healing is a result. The kind of error to which atonement is applied is irrelevant. All healing is essentially the release from fear. All healing is essentially the release from fear. To undertake this, you cannot be fearful yourself. You do not understand healing because of your own fear. Wow. Overt and covert fears. We'd learn about that. Paragraph 2. A major step in the atonement plan is to undo error at all levels. Sickness, or not right-mindedness, there's your cause of sickness, not right-mindedness, is the result of level confusion, because it always entails the belief that what is amiss on one level can adversely affect another. We have referred to miracles as the means of correcting level confusion, for all mistakes must be corrected at the level on which they occur. Only the mind is capable of error. The body can act wrongly only when it is responding to misthought. The body cannot create, and the belief that it can, a fundamental error, produces all physical symptoms. Physical illness represents a belief in magic. The whole distortion that made magic rests on the belief that there is a creative ability in matter which the mind cannot control. This error can take two forms. It can be believed that the mind can miscreate in the body, or that the body can miscreate in the mind. When it is understood that the mind, the only level of creation, cannot create beyond itself, neither type of confusion need occur. So let's read that again. Physical illness represents a belief in magic. The whole distortion that made magic rests on the belief that there is a creative ability in matter which the mind cannot control. This error can take two forms. It can believe that the mind can miscreate in the body, or that the body can miscreate in the mind. When it is understood that the mind, the only level of creation, cannot create beyond itself, neither type of confusion need occur. 3. Only the mind can create because spirit has already been created, and the body is a learning device for the mind. Learning devices are not lessons in themselves. Their purpose is merely to facilitate learning. The worst that a faulty use of a learning device can do is to fail to facilitate learning. It has no power in itself to induce actual learning errors. The body, if properly understood, shares the invulnerability of the atonement to two-edged application. This is not because the body is a miracle, but because it is not inherently open to misinterpretation. The body is merely part of your experience in the physical world. Its abilities can be, and frequently are, over-evaluated. However, it is almost impossible to deny its existence in this world. Those who do so are engaging in a particularly unworthy form of denial. The term unworthy here, and that word unworthy is in quotes, the term unworthy here implies only that it is not necessary to protect the mind by denying the unmindful. If one denies this unfortunate aspect of the mind's power, one is also denying the power itself. So look beyond the body to the cause of the body, which is the mind. Paragraph 4. All material means that you accept as remedies for bodily ills are restatements of magic principles. This is the first step in believing that the body makes its own illness. It is a second misstep to attempt to heal it through non-creative agents. It does not follow, however, that the use of such agents for corrective purposes is evil. Sometimes the illness has a sufficiently strong hold over the mind to render a person temporarily inaccessible to the atonement. In this case, it may be wise to utilize a compromise approach to mind and body, in which something from the outside is temporarily given healing belief. This is because the last thing that can help the non-right-minded or the sick is an increase in fear. Remember that. We don't want to increase people's fear, get in kind of a little argument with someone about what's true and what's not, the body's an illusion and all that. Be aware that we don't want to increase people's fear. That's very important as a miracle worker. Just as a loving brother and sister, alleviate your fears and your brother and sister's fears. This is so he says in the let's back up to, in this case, it may be wise to utilize a compromise approach to mind and body in which something from the outside is temporarily given healing belief. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of times we'll talk about some of the healing benefits of different foods and things, is because, you know, we still are living in this world where we're not, I say this world, the world where the body identifies itself. And sometimes it's a journey to get to the place where we can, with mind, affect all of our changes through the power of forgiveness. But on the process, we can offer as much healing as possible, as much comfort, as much relief from pain. This is because the last thing that can help the non-right-minded or the sick is an increase in fear. They're already in a fear-weakened state. If they are prematurely exposed to a miracle, they may be precipitated into panic. This is likely to occur when upside-down perception has induced the belief that miracles are frightening. And the last paragraph, 5. The value of the atonement does not lie in the manner in which it is expressed. In fact, if it is used truly, it will inevitably be expressed in whatever way is most helpful to the receiver. This means that a miracle, to attain its full efficacy, must be expressed in a language that the recipient can understand without fear. This does not necessarily mean that it is the highest level of communication of which he is capable. It does mean, however, that it is the highest level of communication of which he is capable now. The whole aim of the miracle is to raise the level of communication, not to lower it by increasing fear. Okay, well, let's be fear relievers to ourselves and our brothers and sisters. A meaningless world engenders fear. And let's see, what are we going to, nothing without meaning exists. That was a key idea. Recognition of meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. And our lesson today, what we're going to do is the exercises for today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times for not more than a minute or so, at most each time, are to be practiced in a somewhat different way from the preceding ones. With eyes closed, repeat today's idea to yourself. Then open your eyes and look about you slowly, saying, I'm looking at a meaningless world. So start your lesson by saying a meaningless world engenders fear with your eyes closed. Then open your eyes and say, I'm looking at a meaningless world. Repeat this statement to yourself as you look about. Then close your eyes and conclude. So look about and saying to yourself, I'm looking at a meaningless world. And then at the end of your minute, close your, and it doesn't have to be exact, close your, I definitely wouldn't worry about setting a timer on these. Just kind of when you feel like it's been about a minute, then close your eyes and say, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. And you might have to read that with your eyes open, obviously, and then close your eyes if you can't remember what it was. And take just a moment to settle into that realization that a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today. Meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. I am looking at a meaningless world. I'm looking at a meaningless world. I'm looking at a meaningless world. You can do it. I'm looking at a meaningless world. I'm looking at a meaningless world. Looking at a meaningless world. I'm looking at a meaningless world. And then at the end, after you've done that for a minute, then you close your eyes again and you can say, meaningless world engenders fear. And our word for peace in Korean today is Pyeonghwa. A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. Pyeonghwa.